song shift and to like have that emotional shift. And it doesn't really matter like what I mean, it does matter what the reasons behind it, but it matters more what the feelings behind that. And like, I hope that an audience feels that sense of empowerment in that song, which is a real, very, to me, like direct document about abuse. But to me, yeah, the song lyrics in particular, the script of the film, and like the very like they tell the entire story of the film. Like, the images are very abstract, and you can take them or leave them. But if you listen to the music long enough, it'll give you the meaning. But ending with someone I know and their music was an intentional choice, because to me, it came down to like constantly, like we talked today about community and this and community and that, and like, what's the point of making a very personal film if you're not showing, if you're not including the people you love with your film, you're not including the community with your film. And like, I love working with found materials. Like, found materials can be a very specific way to activate and represent ourselves, but it didn't feel aligned with the values that I want to purport with my work, to only do industry music and not include like so many of my friends are musicians, like not include like one of their songs as part of the piece. And also Olivia, who did that song, when I heard that song, I'm like, it was perfect because it was very direct, it was very blunt, and for the whole piece, which had been really withdrawn, it was a very like, it pierced through all that and it just like gave something very direct and emotional, and like, I hope allow the audience to have something to latch onto, despite how pushing back the piece can be.
Hello. First, just echoing everyone to say thank you for sharing so many amazing intimate parts of your lives, as well as creating some really fantastic sort of experiential pieces to really consider the world around us and the way that we all have to navigate through it. But my specific questions for Eloise and Lauren, I was really enamored with just the overlays and the combination of your physical art pieces and the live film. And I would just really love to know a bit more about your process there, as far as, you know, what came first? Were you painting things and then matching that, or, you know, adding in after, or combination? I also really loved how parts of your actual creation made its way into it as well, seeing you actually paint and work on it. So yeah, just anything you'd like to share about that.
Well, thank you so much for your question. We love talking about the process of making this film, and hopefully it provides an enthusiastic cover for the fact that we were making things up as we went along, and we made a lot of mistakes, and there were a lot of pitfalls. So Lauren, jump in anytime you want, but I would say the overview of what we did, we set out wanting to collaborate on something because we knew we thought about a lot of the same things, and we wanted to do some kind of project together just because we like each other. And we started with live action filming, and then I was doing the filming, and then Lauren and I talked over the shots. And when we had a picture cut, I handed it off to Lauren, and Lauren's now going to say what she did with it.
Yes. Oh, it's doing the echoey thing. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think that works. Okay. Yeah. So from there, Eloise would give me the raw footage, and I would stop it at every single scene and get a screenshot of it, and then make a painting of basically the environment from that scene. And it would have to be anchored very particularly to the screenshot, otherwise things wouldn't line up and it would all fall apart. And after I did the painting, which does look different, very different from the footage I was given, just alike in these very specific points, I would give that back to Eloise, who would work on the collaging. So I'll pass that back to Eloise there.
I would take the original painting that Lauren did, and I would use After Effects and occasionally Photoshop to kind of stitch it all together cohesively. So it was a lot like if you had couple pieces of paper and you were cut and pasting them together. And so I kept on ending up with multiple layers of photos of the painting, multiple layers of video, and just sort of figuring out when to add and subtract and make it all fit together. And I'm really pleased with the result. I'm very proud of what we did because I think that, as with the goal of many films in this program, we really wanted to get at an experience of disability that is in a sort of, if you were going to approach it from a very realist way, which is to say, if you just pointed a camera and captured it as is, if Sam has an invisible condition, it's very difficult to actually be in his head and see things as he sees it. And so when we set out to even come up with this technique that you were asking about, that was the standpoint that we came from. We were thinking, how can we take this out of the realm of realism and kind of move into an expressive place that gets at the more abstract stuff?
I should also point out one of the reasons we chose painting for it to go along with this. I mean, besides Eloise and I wanting to work on something together, but this content and this idea of the house as a living body and this work around chronic illness and disability has been a part of my painting practice for a while, and this film kind of became the crux of that, where more work has come. So it was very, since I was already making work about Sam a lot of the time, we had a path to move forward with it. We had content to work with that already.
Thank you. Penny. I have a question for Carrillo. Your piece was really quite remarkable. And can you talk a little bit about your approach to it and how you're dealing with this documentary and fiction within the work?
Thank you for your question. I start to make this movie from finding this documentary material. It's shots from my childhood, and after that I just want to try to imagine what can be next, what's in the future of this family. And I realized that it's not so sweet like in the first part, in the documentary part. So on that feelings, I try to create the script of the fiction part. I cannot do it with my parents as an actors because they are divorced. So I just try to reconstruct the circumstances like 2 years ago before divorce, when this the culmination moment happens. I don't know. Is it clear answer on your question? If not, you can also give me additional one.
No, I think it's clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question.
I'm going to add a question to that, Carrillo, about, I think you had written maybe in the artist statement text, something that I really liked about people who feel alone when they're together, which I was wondering if you had any thoughts about, or I guess to me that's something that's sort of subtext for all of these projects in a certain way, or part of this idea of an invisible world, or we never know what is going on in someone who's sitting right next to you, could be having a miscarriage, could be, any of these things that we're all going through. And so that idea that I believe you had written about of like wanting to represent that in your film, if you could maybe just talk about how you went about that, or if you think that comes out.
Maybe can you try to make the shorter sentence because I don't understand too fully.
Sure. I'm just thinking about something that you had written. I believe you had written about this project about feeling alone when you're in a room with people that you're close to, or when you're together with other people. And I just wondered if you could talk about that as a theme of this work.
Well, about how I feel now after making the film, or what?
Yeah.
Oh, let it be. Yeah, it was a very interesting moment when my mother watched this film her first time on the festival in the Kyiv, and it's a bit strange when some of the viewers asking about the character, but asking about her, and she's sitting just next to them. And now I feel a bit more like the process of making this film is healing me, and now it's easier to understand their motives of their relationships or their actions and something like that. So yep, that's kind of experience helped me to understand what I want to do next, what's the film, and I think I will continue to discover this type of the connection between family and individual, kind of that.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
I just wanted to say thank you all so much for your really beautiful films, and to Mimesis for this program. I have a question that I'd like to direct to Kim, but that I think really many of you are working around in your films around representing pain. And I'm particularly sort of thinking about, Kim, in your film, the question about believing someone else's pain, and when you enter into this relationship with the medical industry, how you are able to produce evidence of the pain that you experience, and how there's a sort of resonance with how you present the experience to a viewer of your films, what this kind of strategies that you have as a filmmaker to gesture towards the pain that you're experiencing, and perhaps how they relate to the ways that you're sort of compelled to produce evidence of your experience in the medical setting.
Wow, that is an amazing question. It's like a beautiful, complicated question that I think like would love to talk for hours about. Like I think it is really hard. Like especially I guess like in film, I feel like I've tried to write before about ways to try to communicate with an audience about how it actually feels. And I think feedback that I've gotten from my partner, from other people, is that like it just doesn't resonate. Like it just doesn't, it still isn't reflective of the actual experience of living in a body that it has pain. And so I think that is like a question that I'm still trying to figure out for myself in my practice, because I always feel like there's a disconnect. And I always feel like the work is never as accurate as how it actually feels in my everyday life. So I think for like this film, I'm not sure how much of that was like embedded in the motivation for making it, as much as the amount of like shame I just felt after that appointment, and like the process of trying to like release the shame and like blame that I had, like even on myself, of like that I should have showed up differently to the appointment, like I should have shut her down right away. Like I think I held a lot of shame that like, you know, like I have this like certificate in disability studies and I like know all this stuff like about like disability as an intellectual like device, and I still let her walk, like not even walk, just like trample like all over me. And like beyond the intellectual whatever, like I have the experience of what it's been like to live in my body since my injury 10 years ago. So it's kind of like, yeah, I think that I just held a lot of shame in general around the whole experience. And I didn't even like I had my partner transcribe the appointment because I didn't even want to like listen to it at first. And then I was able to like cut down from the transcript. I was able to like cut down what I actually wanted to include because there was a lot that I ended up taking out. And there was a lot of like things that I did to like defend myself in the appointment, like in real life. And I ended up just like cutting that out because I was like, you know, I did this in real life to try to like convince somebody who like didn't deserve my convincing that like I deserve to be believed. And now that I'm trying to reclaim this experience, I'm choosing to not defend myself. And I'm choosing to just let her beliefs speak for themselves, and how ignorant she was kind of like speak for herself. And so, yeah, I actually like didn't even cry during the actual appointment. Like the crying that I had in it was actually like in the car, like afterwards. And I decided to just like splice that earlier so that there was some that play between like reality and like how I actually felt on the inside and what actually happened during the appointment were closer together. And so by like trying to bend my memory of what happened, it was also a way of trying to release the shame of how I felt, how it went, and heard judgments and all of that. So yeah, I think I like went off on a lot of different things there, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks. Kim, I actually had kind of a follow-up question for that, because I was really struck by the resonance between Lauren's film and your film around the representation of disability, not as something that's ugly, but as also something that like being able to create beauty and have beauty be a part of one's life. And I was really struck in your film the ways that you use the choreography with the parking lot as a rejoinder to the kind of ugliness and pain. The violence seemed to be located outside, right, in these empty vistas of parking lots with like dirty snow. And I'm very interested in how you came to that, the choreography of the gestures with the surface textures of the concrete in the parking lot. And if you could speak a little bit about, you know, the filmmaker parts of it, like how you framed it, how your use of color in those scenes.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, the reason I got hurt was because I was a dancer. So that's kind of like the origin of how a lot of my disability things started unfolding, was because of this dance injury. And now in my position as an educator, I'm supposed to be like teaching film to dancers. So like I'm put in this like scenario again where I'm like needing to like face dance in a different body now. And so I think that the choreography, like it's all improvised, and just like I guess like technically as the filmmaker, I mean, I just do everything by myself. And so I asked my partner to come out and make sure that things were framed properly, and that things were in focus, but I just decided, and I think too, like in regards to disability, I just put a time cap on things, and like when I'm done, I'm done. Like, so I did things for like 20 minutes and I was like, I hope something works. And if it doesn't, then I'll come back next week when I'm not in pain and try again. And so I think it's like a collaging of trying to work in my boundaries of pain. And also, yeah, I think that there's this like, I don't know how much it reads, but for me, there's like a desire in the film with all of the accessible spots. Like, I still don't have a pass. Like, it was like, it's really convoluted, but like, I never ended up like getting an accessible pass. And so there's this kind of like desire to be close to the spot. You know, it's kind of like I can get out of my car and dance in one or touch one or put my body on one. And it's like physically, like I can inhabit the spot in that way, even though like legally, medically, I'm not allowed to. So yeah, just like a way of trying to like resist this idea that like I'm not allowed to do this, like I'm not allowed to be here. And on a larger scale, like just in terms of like dance frameworks, that like I'm not even allowed to like that's I think in a lot of dance frameworks, like the gestures and kind of the movements that I do like aren't really considered choreography because it's so minimal. But for me, being like dealing with disability, like that's what I can do in my body. So that's the way that I dance. And I consider it dance because that's what I'm allowed, what my body lets me do. So just trying to like push back on like ideas of like who's allowed, like how much am I allowed to be here and do things. Thanks.
Thank you. So we have maybe 2 more questions, Joanna, and then Kelly.
Hi. Thank you. Sarah, thank you, and the whole programming team. Thank you for such a very thought-provoking program and beautifully put together. And I just wanted to say a couple of things, if I may, to sort of piggyback on another, I think, Michael Metzger's comment about proof, or sort of like, you know, defense of oneself and having to constantly, if you don't present one certain way, having to sort of bend in different ways to be heard or accepted or even even barely listened to in some ways. This idea that the mind, I think very strongly that the mind, what we can't see, our internal struggles are really part of our physical selves as well, and how much, it reminds me of this saying, feelings are facts. Yvonne Rainer's title of her own memoir is like, feelings are facts, and what we do, how we feel is also reflected in how our physical body manifests, and vice versa. It's like a cycle, right? It was so interesting in some of the films how gendered experience underlies so many of the films, if not all of them, actually. And Laurie, I was thinking about in your film, you're very much aware of being surrounded by so many men and so many bros in the film industry as well. And I'm very familiar with that kind of feeling of like, small slam dance or film festivals that can also block out different ways of experiencing or talking or about acknowledging one's own feelings. Or I don't know if that's a full thought or not, but it just really brought it home for me. And I was also thinking really during Devin, the song that you're singing towards the end of your piece about tricking the mind and having like that refrain of, I'm going to trick my mind into believing that I'm okay. I'm going to trick myself. And it really, this idea that you have to talk yourself into, you have to convince yourself internally to present or to act somehow. What am I trying to say? It's so, I think it leads to real depression. This idea that, you have to behave in a certain way, or you have to trick your mind to fit in air quotes, like the idea of being part of a society or part of a situation, which leads me to think about Ollie and your relationship with your brother, Jeff. And I just wanted to say how beautiful that relationship is, and how much I appreciate you sharing that within your video. I just think it's amazing. Like, Jeff is struggling so hard, but they completely trust you and embrace you. Like it's the relationship you had with Jeff is just so beautiful, and that's really, I wanted to thank you for showing that.
Thank you, John.
Kelly, did you still have a question? Okay, it's coming.
Thank you, Toma. Thank you for all the filmmakers. There's so much to think about in this piece. And as someone who has spent a lot of last year in doctors' offices, I was really thinking about Lori and Kim's work and kind of these moments when like the care is missing a little bit from healthcare and it becomes alienating. Lori, with you having to go to this office with a doctor you didn't know in a place you weren't familiar with. And Kim, I was really struck, and here's where the question is, with the recording. And I was wondering if this is something that you were doing just as like out of habit, like I'm just recording the appointment just so I have all the information there if I have to go back and check it, or was it something standard and then this total disaster of an exchange happened, or were you expecting something like that? I'm just so curious about kind of your impulse to record, and if this if you were caught off guard as this was happening or not.
Yeah. Hi, Kelly. It's good to
Hi.
see you. Yeah. So last fall, so I didn't do like record my doctor's appointments. But last fall I went to the gynecologist because I wanted my IUD out. I felt like it was causing me pain. Like I just had this like gut feeling that I had like chronic UTIs and just like chronic problems ever since getting the IUD in, and I just wanted it out. And she refused to like take it out. And I was like, oh my God, like I wish I had recorded this, because like this is really crazy. Not crazy, but it just, I couldn't believe that she refused care. And then like a month after that, I went to a different doctor and asked for an accessible pass. And I was living in central New York, and I was like, I'm going to record this just because if I just want to protect myself if something were to happen again. And it was like totally chill. It was like the most, like I didn't even have to say anything. Like I like explained my situation and the form was like already signed. And I was like, cool. Like I didn't need to record that. So I think that I was like going into this appointment and now I'm in Utah and it's a conservative state, and like I wasn't going to record it. And then like probably like a minute before the doctor came in, I was like, you know what? It doesn't hurt. Like it's a voice memo on my phone. Like why? And if it goes well, then I'll just delete it. And like, what's the problem? So yeah, I just did it like on a whim, and then that happened. So it's like, it just, I don't really know what to do with these recordings. What are you going to do? Like sue them? I honestly like don't know what to do with them other than like they are a document of something that happened, and that in this scenario I decided to try to reclaim in my video practice. And maybe that's the only way that you can like try to reclaim something like that. But yeah, it's always a practice now, like going forward, and it is legal in the state of Utah. As long as you're part of the conversation, it is legal to record it. So I know it's like different in every state, but yeah.
Thank you. It's a great piece, and I think it really resonated with me. And I just, even though you were being trampled, it's just such, I think the audience had such care. I could feel it in the room here, for you through the video. So that was real here.
Thanks.
Hello. Oh, thank you. I think we should wrap it up because of time. I would love to hear more about all of these projects. Keep thinking about how self-advocacy and dignity should not be mutually exclusive. And hopefully we'll see you at screening later on today. Thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Devin, for being here in person. Beautiful work.